I was about to go home after performing an hours-long surgery on a pregnant patient with an amniotic infection. Then suddenly, an ambulance brought in 2 car crash victims in urgent need of care. When the ambulance doors opened, I could never have imagined that the male patient was my husband, and the female patient was his pregnant mistress. I froze for 3 seconds before carrying out a plan that would shock my husband when he found out who the father of his mistress's baby really was. My name is Michelle, 35 years old, and I had just stepped out of the operating room after a 6-hour surgery, both legs numb as if I had just run a marathon, the collar of my blouse still damp with cold sweat. December night shifts at Ascension Hospital were always like this: loud, frantic, and never leaving an obstetrician like me a moment to breathe. I just wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and sleep a 6-hour stretch without an alarm when the on-call phone suddenly buzzed. The charge nurse's voice came through the speaker. "Dr. Miller, we have 2 trauma patients incoming. Severe abdominal bleeding, possible miscarriage." I froze for exactly 1 second, then instinctively sprinted toward the emergency department like I always did. But this time, just as the ER doors swung open, I saw the ambulance slide into the driveway. Red lights scanned over tense faces. 2 stretchers were unloaded at once. I took a step forward, and my eyes froze in place. The man on the first stretcher, shirt soaked with rain, a long gash across his forehead pressed with gauze, blood trickling down his temple, was Jackson, my husband. His face was pale, a large bruise blooming on the left side of his head, hair disheveled from the impact. I didn't have time to process what had happened before my eyes landed on the second stretcher. A young woman, black silk dress soaked in blood, both hands clutching her abdomen in painful spasms. Jennifer Davis, my husband's new assistant. She was still conscious, lips tight from the pain, voice trembling. "My baby, please, help my baby." For a very brief moment, I felt my heartbeat drop into the pit of my chest. Every suspicion, every creeping doubt that had lingered in my mind these past 2 months, all of it suddenly snapped together like an icy slap. But my body, trained for over 10 years in this environment, automatically straightened. I put on my mask, pulled on gloves, and stepped between them, voice utterly neutral. "I'm the attending physician. Move both patients to Trauma Bay 3. An ER doctor turned to me and asked, "Dr. Miller, you know the family?" I looked directly at the patient chart in front of me, not sparing Jackson even half a glance. "No, I'm just the attending physician." I took Jennifer's hand, checked her pulse, her blood pressure, ordered immediate IV fluids. She looked at me, eyes wide with panic, as if she couldn't believe the person bent over saving her life was the legal wife of the man whose baby she was carrying. But I replied with one sentence, cold and clinically precise: "I will do my job. Hold still." And as soon as I finished saying "hold still," I drew the curtain closed, adjusted the surgical light, and switched fully into clinical mode. "I am the attending physician. Mr. Miller is a family member of the patient." I stated each word clearly for the nurse to record, my voice so steady that even my own heart couldn't hear the crack inside it. Jennifer was panting, the blood-soaked black dress clinging tightly to her belly, but I did not let emotion seep in, not even a thousandth of a second. I examined her uterus, checked the fetal heart rate, ordered a FAST scan to check for intra-abdominal fluid, and called for a second EV line. I told the resident beside me, "Record exactly, pulse 122, blood pressure 92/58, sharp lower abdominal pain, suspect intrauterine hematoma. Prepare CBC, CMP, coag panel, and stat beta HCG." Everything by the book, nothing extra, nothing missing, not a single step off. I rolled the ultrasound cart closer, applied gel to the probe, working gently enough that no one could accuse me of causing intentional pain. The screen showed a gestational sac contracting abnormally. I adjusted the angle, measured the CRL, measured fetal heart rate, then asked the nurse to prepare tocolytics according to protocol. Everything proceeded rapidly, precisely, to the point that one nurse whispered, Dr. Miller is a machine tonight." I heard it, but didn't react. I just wanted everything so flawless that no one could say I showed favoritism or neglect, especially in a situation where I had the deepest reason to lose objectivity. When the nurse signed off in the electronic medical record, I stepped into the charting room, closed the door, took a long, deep breath, then typed each word onto the screen. Care provided according to protocol, no personal involvement. I read that sentence 3 times to ensure each word was as sharp as a scalpel. But inside me, a very small flame had just been lit. A flame Jennifer should never have ignited. I stepped out of the recovery room, closed the door, and had only taken a few steps when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Michelle, wait, please!" Jackson called out, his voice hoarse and panicked, like a man chasing the ghost of his own mistakes. I didn't turn around, but he still ran after me, one hand pressing the gauze on his forehead, the other touching lightly at my elbow, as if reaching for an anchor. "Michelle, It's not what you think. I can explain. It was an accident. I stopped right in the middle of the hallway, turned to face him. The hospital lighting was so white I could see every dried streak of blood tangled in his hair. I spoke softly, but each word was as sharp as a scalpel. "In here, I'm a doctor. Family matters come later." My voice was so calm that Jackson froze. Maybe he had grown too accustomed to me being gentle, patient, always listening. But tonight, he needed to listen to himself and face the consequences of what he had done. I left him standing in the hallway and walked away as if he was just any other patient's family member. When I reached the hospital entrance, the cold air slapped against my face. I held myself together until I crossed the parking lot, where the yellow streetlights reflected on my car windows. The moment the door closed, the silence inside the car crushed my chest. Everything I had been pushing down suddenly surged up. I cried. Not because I had lost Jackson, but because of the humiliation the two of them created right in the middle of my shift. My hands trembled so much, I had to set my phone on the passenger seat before calling Mia. She answered after exactly 1 ring. "Michelle? What happened?" I couldn't speak for the first few seconds. Only the sound of my choked breathing came through. Mia's tone changed instantly, turning into steel. "Come to my place, now." I drove on autopilot, streetlights flashing by like a film fast-forwarding. When I arrived at Book Tower Apartments, the $2 million penthouse in downtown Detroit, Mia was already at the door, wrapped in a long cardigan, eyes wide as she saw me. The moment she reached me, she pulled me into her arms, holding me tightly as if trying to keep me from collapsing. Affairs always come with a price. The only question is when. I sat down on the cream Minotti sofa Mia adored, my hands still shaking. I told her everything, from the sirens, to the image of Jackson on the stretcher with blood-soaked gauze, to Jennifer's "Why, you?" Every sentence I managed to say, Mia tightened her grip on my shoulder. Not to comfort me, just to keep me upright. When I fell silent, Mia stood up, poured me a glass of water, and said, "All right. If they want a war, we fight with the law." Then she picked up her phone, dialed a familiar number, and said, "I want him here tomorrow. Michelle needs support." I looked at her, confused. Mia gave a thin, cold smile. "Not just support. Michelle, to protect yourself, you need someone who knows how to dig out the truth." She set down her phone, turned to me. "This is William Carter, a detective I've worked with on 2 financial divorce cases. He's good, discreet, and most importantly, he never loses." And for the first time that night, I stopped crying. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because I realized I wouldn't be fighting alone. 2 days later, I was sitting in the on-call room, the neon lights reflecting off the cold steel table. I was reviewing lab results for a few patients when my phone vibrated. "William Carter, incoming call." I answered. William's voice was low, steady, and so precise it felt like each word had been pre-selected. "Dr. Miller, I have the first set of results." I locked the door behind me. "Tell me, William." He didn't waste time. Jennifer Davis had a child when she was in college, but she does not know who the father is. It was the result of a party involving more than 4 men, none of whom took responsibility. I froze, my fingers tightening on the edge of the table. And the child? Noah, William replied. 5 years old, currently living with Jennifer's parents in Grand Rapids. Jennifer sends $5,000 a month for his care, but she has never told anyone at the company she has a child. I leaned back in my chair, feeling as if someone had ripped open a curtain, hiding her entire secret life. William continued, his voice unchanged. 3 years ago, Jennifer applied to work for Jackson's company. Within the first 14 months, she had romantic involvement with 3 men in the office. All of them ended quietly because she demanded privacy. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay composed. And she and Jackson, when did that start? About a year ago, when she became Jackson's personal assistant. After that, the number of messages, calls, and one-on-one meetings quadrupled. I heard my own heart beat, no longer breaking, but shifting, from pain to coldness. William paused for a few seconds, then delivered the heaviest part. 9 months ago, Jackson began transferring $12,000 each month to a company under Jennifer's name, Davis Consulting LLC, but the company has no activity, no filing, no legal transactions. It's essentially a pass-through account. I understood immediately. Internal laundering? Exactly. Or concealing marital assets. Both are crimes. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear the air conditioner or the ambulance sirens outside the window. Only my own breathing, slow, heavy, and calmer than I expected. Good, keep digging, I said, my voice flat like water before a storm. Go deeper into the account and find out who else is involved. William answered instantly. I'll send a full report within 48 hours. Prepare yourself. This isn't just infidelity, Michelle. This is an underground financial scheme. I set the phone down, staring at the pair of gloves on the desk. In that moment, I realized some wounds can only be treated with truth. And truth, once unearthed, can never be buried again. I closed my phone, stood up, and washed my hands under cold water, letting my mind settle under the steady stream. The truth about Jennifer's past was only the first layer. I needed the next layer, the one no one could deny, the one science itself would validate. That very morning, when Jennifer was transferred to the special observation room, I walked in with the calm professionalism of a physician. Your condition is more stable, I said, checking her vitals. I want to run a few additional screening tests to ensure the fetus isn't at risk. Jennifer nodded immediately, likely assuming it was routine. She didn't know that among the panel of tests I ordered, I quietly added one more. An expanded NIPT test, the kind that analyzes fetal DNA in the mother's blood and can determine genetic similarity to a presumed father. I handed the order to the nurse and left the room without further explanation. In the medical record, I wrote a vague but medically valid reason. Indication: standard genetic screening due to abdominal trauma. No one questioned it, no one asked. 3 days later, just after finishing a laparoscopic procedure, the lab nurse called me in a low voice. Dr. Miller, your confidential results are ready. Do you want them printed or viewed privately? I wiped sweat from my forehead. Privately, send them to my secure email. I entered an empty conference room and locked the door. The cold air made my hands tremble as I opened my laptop. When the result file appeared, the first line I saw was, paternal match probability, 0%. I didn't breathe for several seconds. Not out of shock, but because everything had finally taken on a shape that could not be denied. The baby inside Jennifer was not Jackson's. What I felt wasn't relief, nor pain. It was a ruthless serenity, like removing a needle that had been embedded in my heart for weeks. I didn't enter the result into her chart. A result like this, at this moment, would only make Jennifer suspicious and compromise everything. I stored the file in my private directory, encrypted it with 2 layers of passwords, then sent a copy to only one person, William Carter. with a single brief line. "Follow this lead." 2 minutes later, William called back. "Got it. Give me 48 hours. If the baby isn't Jackson's, then there must be someone else. I'll find him." I closed my eyes, leaned back in the chair, letting myself breathe normally again. The truth was finally falling into place, and though I didn't yet know what I would do with it, I knew one thing for certain. This battle was no longer between me and Jennifer. It was expanding into something much larger, something even Jackson never saw coming. 3 days later, I drove alone from Detroit to Ann Arbor for my mother-in-law's birthday. The drive took nearly an hour, and I spent almost half of it preparing myself to keep up the perfect daughter-in-law face that Jackson's family always expected. I maintained the right breathing, the right smile, the same kindness I'd always shown them, not for Jackson, but for my own dignity. When I entered the house, everyone cheered to welcome me. My mother-in-law hugged me tightly, as if everything was still perfect. Jackson stood behind her, the wound on his forehead still visible, though the gauze had been replaced. He walked over, bent down, and kissed my hair. A gesture so sweet, the entire family let out a chorus of delighted awes. To anyone looking in, we must have looked like a couple who had just fallen in love all over again. But as I sat beside him, it felt like sitting next to a stranger, a man I was quietly waiting on to see what else he might be hiding. Dishes were brought out, conversation buzzed cheerfully. I nodded, smiled on cue, responded gently, never once deviating from the serene image I had crafted through 7 years of marriage into this family. But inside, my chest was so tight, every breath